Hey, my name's David. I want to thank you for joining us here at the Welding Lab. Today I'm going to show you how to prepare test plates for a guided bend test. We're going to be using 3/8 inch carbon steel with a backing strip. For a grade, we'll be using two 3" by 6" pieces. For certification, we'll be using two 3 by 7" pieces. I'll show you 4 different ways to prepare your bevels. I'll be showing you the track torch, I'll be showing you the hand torch, I'll show you the end mill, and I'll show you the good old-fashioned hand grinder. Before we get started cutting metal, first thing we need to talk about is these groove angles and bevel angles. Now, a groove angle is the combination of the two bevel angles. So one piece would be considered a bevel angle. When you have the two together, that will be considered a groove angle. For GMAW, we use a 60-degree groove angle. And for SMAW, we'd be using a 75-degree groove angle. And all you do is to determine what your degree of angle will be, or degree of bevel will be, you just divide this in half, the 60-degree in half, and for GMAW, that is 30 degrees. Now, to determine where exactly on the protractor we need to put this, they're not actually asking you to put a 30-degree bevel on there. If you were to put a 30-degree bevel on it, it would be way too steep. What they're asking you for is to shave 30 degrees off of this 90 degrees right here that the plate was before we started working on it. So for GMAW, you just subtract 30 degrees, which would be half of the groove angle. You subtract 30 degrees from this 90 degrees, and that ends up being 60 degrees. For SMAW, you subtract, or you take 37.5 degrees off of this 90 degrees. That ends up being 52.5. The reason these are different is for access of our electrode. It takes a little bit more room for a SMAW or a stick electrode to get down in this groove angle. All right, let's go cut some plates up. Here's our plate that we cut out. This plate was cut on the shear, and I don't know if you can see it or not, but that shear puts a little bit of a pinch on these plates. Now, what you want to do is you want to take your bevel, you want to cut that pinch away. You want to make sure that pinch is not on the bottom side. If it's on the bottom side, then you're going to have a little bit of a void there whenever you put your backing strip on there. So you want to make sure, as I said, you want to make sure that pinch is on the top side. Here's our protractor, and we're going to set this. I'm going to set it for 60 degrees, which will be for GMAW. And right here is 60 degrees. So what we do, we set it up here. I line this up on the bottom, and I just take a piece of soapstone and I put me a line on here. After you do a few of these, you won't even have to do this. You just jump in there and start grinding, and you'll pretty much know what it's supposed to look like. Okay, now there's my mark I put on there. Now, you're not going to grind all the way back to that mark. I just put that mark there as a reference. So you will grind, you'll start grinding your bevel, and you'll just keep your bevel parallel with this line. So you don't necessarily have to come up to the point. You know, you don't have to keep it exactly where you want it. As I said, you just make sure that your grind mark, or your grind, is parallel with this line. Okay, now to mark the other side, I always put me, whichever way my bevel's going, I always just put me a little mark here on top. That just saves, you may get confused and put it on the wrong side, put your bevel going the wrong way. So now I know my bevel's going here. I put me another mark on this side to know that that's where I need to be. Now I'm going to turn this, as you can see, this protractor goes from 0 to 180 this way, and it also has a set of numbers that goes from 0 to 180 back this way. So I'm going to change, put this on the other side, on the other 60 degrees. set it up here. Put me a little mark. Okay. Now for you beginners, for you guys that haven't done this very much, what I like to have you guys do is you'll take your grinder and you'll get about, maybe a half an inch of this ground to your, pretty close to the bevel that you want on both sides. And that way that you don't have to constantly be checking it, because you already got a bit of a bevel on the side. And I like to get maybe about 80% of my bevel cut. Just cut it rough. Just jump in there and cut back and forth your grinder, back and forth. But that's going to be it'll leave it kind of chattered looking. It'll have a real rough finish to it. After you get it down to about 80 or 90%, then you come back with your grinder and go in one direction. You grind, lift off of it, grind, lift off of it, sort of like blocking a car, blocking paint on a car. And that'll help smooth it up as you go in one direction. If you go back and forth, like I said, as you go back, it chatters it and the grinder jumps. So after you get about 90%, then come back and just go in one direction. Okay, we're going to grind our plates. First thing we need to do is put our safety equipment on. I'm going to use some earplugs and some safety glasses. And I'm also going to use a grinding shield. I'm up against this wall here. Of course, anytime you want to use a grinding shield, especially here though, you'll catch a lot of ricochets off this wall. And if you're not the only one in the shop, you're also going to catch some ricochets maybe from somebody else grinding. So make sure you use your grinding shield as well as your safety glasses. Okay, I'm going to clamp the corner of this down. A pair of these R11 vice grips. Got me a pair of gauntlets here. Now this grinding disc, they are designed to grind on the edge like this at a 45-degree angle. As we get it a little bit closer to where we want it, then we'll start planing it. We're going to bring it down just a little bit because we don't want to cut all that much. We just want to smooth the surface. All right, here we go. Okay, I have the corners ground. I'm fairly close to my 30-degree bevel that I'm going to put on here. And that's this. When I grind these edges here, that's just going to give me a guide so that I can grind it a little more quickly without having to worry about checking that bevel constantly. And now I'm going to clamp it down. I'm going to really get with it, take as much material off as I can quickly. I'm going to use, you can use 2 clamps or just one. Of course, 2 is going to hold better than 1, but this grinder turns this way, clockwise. If I put a clamp on this side, I'm liable to get a lot of ricochets off this clamp. So I'm going to just leave a clamp here, and I'm going to grind it real quickly. All right, here we go. Alright, I got this pretty close to where I want it now. It's a little rough. It's a little chattered looking, but I'm going to come back and clean it up. Taking this grinder in one direction and planing it off there. I didn't film that whole sequence. It's a little bit boring sitting watching somebody grind. It took about probably 3 minutes maybe to complete this grind. Of course, I've been doing it a while. If it takes you a little longer, don't get discouraged. Okay, the last bit of grinding I did was with this angle. It's about 30 degrees probably. Now I'm going to come back and I'm going to flatten it out a little bit, and I'm going to go in one direction. I'm going to go from right to left. Right, that looks pretty good. I'm going to now grind the mill scale off the top and the bottom side. Now be real careful when you grind the mill scale off this back side. You don't want to put any kind of a bevel on this back side. If you do, it'll be just like leaving that pinch on there from the shear. And when you use backing strip, it'll leave a little bit of a void back in there, and it'll look like you didn't penetrate well. So we grind back about 1 inch on the top and about 1 inch on the bottom side. We'll be using a backing strip for this particular weld, and when you use a backing strip, you come to a knife edge. You don't put any landing or flat spot on here. If you're going to do an open root, you'll leave a little bit of a landing here, which is really a landing, it's just a little flat spot on there. I'm going to check before I stop grinding. I'm going to take my protractor here. I'm going to check, see what my bevel is. And this one is about 59 degrees. You're allowed a couple degrees one way or the other. A degree or two one way or the other is not really going to matter all that much. Alright, very similar in operation to the hand torch. The only real difference is, obviously, it runs on a track and you don't have to move it by hand. And instead of a cut lever, you have a switch that you roll over that stays in position, so you don't have to hold it as it travels. It has adjustments on it. Here on the end, you can adjust the height of the torch. This knob here, you adjust the angle, and this knob adjusts how far away from the track you actually are. Right, now when we put our test plates in here, we got this little jig made that holds your plates. And again, you want to make sure you cut that pinch off of there, just in case you don't cut back far enough and leave some of that roll on there. So I'm putting my pinch part on the top. It's got two little set screws here. You turn. Okay, I'm going to back it up to where it's going to engage my plate as it cuts. I'll get my height set. I'm going to be about 3/16 maybe off the plate here. Tighten it down. Okay, now to set our angle, it's got some angles on there, but it's kind of hard to read, and you have to go on the back side to read it. So the way I do, I set my protractor at whatever angle I want, and then Also, what may happen is sometimes you'll get a little bit of trash under these set screws here, or maybe it's not fitting under there properly, and your plate might not be sitting just quite level. If you use this, then it's set to the torch, or the torch is set to the plate instead of the torch being set to the table. Okay, so I just eyeball it, get it set here straight, and I bring it up until the torch body and this protractor arm are parallel. And I tighten it down where I want it. And I set my height again and my depth. And now we are ready to cut. Of course, you want to make sure you got your shade 5s on before you start cutting. Now you may be tempted not to wear these shade 5s because you're not actually holding it with your hand. You may be tempted to just hit the trigger and let it go. But you won't be able to set your neutral flame if you don't have these cutting glasses on. You won't be able to see it well enough. Okay, I got my plate set. I got two set of shade 5s. I got me a set of shade 5s. I'm going to make a cut here. Now I want to run this torch down the length of this plate to make sure I'm sitting in there straight. If I'm a little bit crooked, I'm not going to make a proper cut. Alright, here we go. So I'm going to light the torch, get my neutral flame, and I'm going to hit the drive and let it cut. Preheat, hit the drive, let it cut. Alright, here we go. Run my cut, run a little bit fast. So just going to back it up, give it another try. Right to the edge of where I cut before. I can't cut in that I've already previously cut. It's already oxidized and it won't cut very well. After you make a torch cut, you'll have to come back and grind a little bit of that heated area off. And depending on how much carbon content is in this steel, depends on how far back you have to cut. Now, a good way to know if you got enough off, when you first start grinding there where the torch cut it, the grinding sparks will have, if you're not deep enough, those grinding sparks will have real fuzzy tails on them. It's the carbon that's burning off of those sparks as they're flying through the air. It's that extra carbon burning off of them. Once you get down far enough, the sparks will have only maybe 2 tails. Before you have enough off, it'll have maybe 3 or 4 tails. So that's a good way to tell. And it's not much. You don't have to take a tremendous amount. Okay, this is our end mill. We have a gauge here on the side that shows you what the degrees are, and it's going to be just like before. You're going to use that complementary angle. We're going to set this at 60 degrees. The way you change this, the way you move this head, you loosen these 4 nuts up here in the front, and then turn this turnkey here. You use a wrench to do it, and that actually sets your height. Okay, we're going to get going here. Make sure that your bit's not engaged with your plate whenever you turn this on. And also, I have this plate with the pinch side that's going to be cut off. So you want to make sure that just like before, you want to make sure you cut that off. And you'll notice that I roll my sleeves up and I tuck my hair back down in the back of my shirt. If you ever see pictures of anybody that got caught up in a piece of equipment like this, you'll make sure you do the same. All right, here we go. We won't take too much off at one time. As you're doing this, if you see your bit or your chips coming off glue, then you're taking too much off and you're getting too hot. Part about this is the cleanup. Alright, I have my plates prepared. I got the mill scale ground back. One backing strip that I ground the mill scale off of. I have 3 other pieces of backing strip. And the backing strip in this case is 3/8 by 1 inch, and they're 8 inches long, 2 inches longer than our plate. Now the reason I have 4 of these, one of them will actually be the backing strip, 2 of them will be levelers, and 1 will be brace across the top so my vice grips will hold. Okay, so I'm going to get all these lined up. Now the gap that you leave in here will depend upon what process you're using. Stick, I like to use a 1/4 inch gap. If you get any smaller than that, with a 1/8 rod with a flux on it, your electrode won't get down in the gap far enough for your long arm. But you can talk to your instructor about that, and that's sort of arbitrary. You can do whatever gap you want within a range. Okay, now then my last backing strip, I'll lay it across the top. I'm going to use my pliers to clamp it all down. remember, what we want to do here is get it really nice and tight. If it's not, you'll have that void there and it'll look like you didn't penetrate. So we get this on here. All right, we're ready to tack. I've got the end clamp. Make sure there's no gap up under here. Gauntlets on so I don't get burnt. And we'll put you some pretty substantial tacks in here. You don't just break it loose on you. You should need this grain. Okay, now you may be tempted to just turn this plate around. You may be tempted to just turn this plate around and tack this side. But if you do that, you could end up with a bow in it. So I got this side tacked, I'll turn it upside down, and tack the back side. I'm going to put some pretty substantial tacks in here. I don't want this thing popping loose on me before I even get it welded. I'm going to put it right in the center, right where the strips will come an inch out of the center, or off the center. So I'm going to put my tacks right in the very dead center. Alright, now I'm flipping around. Your levelers may not be necessary at this point, but I'm going to go ahead and put it in there just to keep everything square and make it square. And then I'll tack this side. Just a couple more tacks. Bevel cut with a torch. You get your piece of angle iron and you set it up and you just let the torch, head of the torch ride against that piece of angle iron, and you can adjust your angle somewhat at the end here, and that just helps you put an angle cut on.